I would never have heard of Harry Blackstone, Copperfield, Dresden, had it not been for my youngest brother, and he would never have heard of Harry Dresden had it not been for me. This contradictory statement would probably be welcome in the universe of the Dresden Files, and actually makes perfect sense. Growing up, I had never been close with my brothers. One is 6 years younger than me, the other 7, and I had always been a bookish, isolated person. The year after I started university, my father, who had been divorced from my mother for about 6 years by that point, took a job in my college town, and within a few years my youngest brother had moved in with him for high school. By that point, all I knew about my youngest brother was that he liked video games. But since I would spend time at my father's apartment for the odd free meal, I would start to learn more. My father had Netflix, and through that my brother introduced me to the very short-lived TV series, The Dresden Files, which he enjoyed. And I'd enjoyed the show as well, though I was sad that it only lasted a season. Since I'd always been terrible at picking birthday and Christmas gifts for my brothers, when my brother's birthday rolled around, I suddenly remembered the series and bought him the first novel, Stormfront by Jim Butcher. Considering he owns them all, I guess it was a good gift. He spent a few years convincing me to read them, and once I finally did, I guess that was a good idea too, because I own them all. They are hugely different from the sci-fi series, and much, much better. As you've probably realized by this point, we're going to take a look at the magic of the Dresden Files and how it jives up with conventional magical theory. One of the earliest important forms of magic introduced in Stormfront is the concept of names, namely that if a wizard has a person or creature's name from their own lips, he has power over them. According to Harry, everything in the whole world has its own name. Names are unique sounds and cadences of words that are attached to one specific individual. If you know something's name, you can create a magical link to it, just as you can call someone up and talk to them if you know their phone number. This is a concept found often in folklore, such as the story of Rumpelstiltskin, wherein the young maiden could foil the goblin simply by guessing his true name. It's also found in Celtic folklore, where a newly born child was given a true name, known only by his godparents. But an iconic image is found in the mythology of ancient Egypt, where a lot of ritual magic can trace its roots. The goddess Isis is, in her many roles, a goddess of magic and healing. One day, the sun god Ra was bitten by a serpent that Isis had created out of dust and Ra's own spittle. The god grew very ill, and because the serpent had been made from a part of Ra, he was unable to banish the poison from his body. He summoned Isis to him, and she agreed to heal him, but her price was his secret name. While Ra resisted for a time, the pain grew to a point he could not bear, and finally he relented and told Isis his secret name. She healed him, but because she knew the secret name of the most powerful of the gods, she now had power to equal his. This isn't meant to be a fan review, but one of the most brilliant concepts Butcher has is introduced from the beginning in Stormfront as the Never Never. This is a nonsense term that it precisely conveys exactly what the author means. The Never Never is imagination land, the spiritual plane, the astral field, and fairyland all rolled up in one. It is, in fact, later confirmed that the elven lands, simply called fairy, are the largest chunk of the Never Never, but there's a lot more to it than that. And then there's the outer gates, and what's beyond. Between our world and the Never Never are the ways, the paths that make it shorter, if not easier, to get from one point in our world to another. These were navigated in depth by Harry's mother, Margaret Gwendolen Le Fay, the information stored in a ruby she passed on to her son. This is reminiscent of the old fairy mounds of the British Isles, the soft spots where our world and theirs might touch, or even the fairy circles of trees or mushrooms said to form where fairies dance. Other authors have explored the concept of Underhill or Elfland, going back to medieval times, but post-medieval ballads such as those by Child, like those of Thomas the Rhymer, are a common source for modern writers. The fairy mounds in Ireland, literal mounds of earth, are said to mark the gateways to the Aeschi, or people of the mound, the semi-mythical ancient ancestors of the Irish, also known as the Tuatha Dana, or children of the goddess Danu. Butcher makes use of the elves and a lot of the common mythology surrounding them, specifically involving the summer and winter court, which are traditionally referred to in Scottish folklore as Seelie and Unseelie. This classification may derive from the Norse tradition, which features bright elves, or Hvitalfar, and dark elves, Svartalfar, according to Jacob Grimm. While all fairies are known for being mischievous, the Seelie court is more inclined to help humans in need, and the unseelie more inclined to harm them. There are also fairies, usually lesser ones, like the Welsh Tylwyth Teg, or the higher ones, like the aforementioned Aeshe, demigods at the very least, who belong to neither court. Butcher has taken very creative liberties with the traditional fairy tales, however. In no other medium have I encountered the idea of multiple fairy queens reigning over a court. True, they will often cast a queen over the Seelie and a queen over the unseelie. To date, I have only ever heard mention of Oberon as king, and Butcher has never made mention of a fairy king, but never in the way Butcher envisioned. Butcher's concept of the queen who was, the queen who is, and the queen who is to come, Summer Night, is a wholly unique concept that has been an integral plot device on more than one occasion. More, there is an impression of mystery behind the entire thing, especially as far as the queen who was. Going back to the idea of names, when Harry has to summon Mother Winter, the queen who was of the Winter Court, of course, he uses logic and instinct to come up with a list of names. Mother Summer, who is her sister and housemate, was worried about his usage of names, until Mother Winter said, "Not that one." But he has seen the adversary and learned one of its names, Cold Days, which is very vague. I've read enough of these books to know that Jim Butcher is going somewhere, and it's somewhere amazing, but we're just along for the ride. I'm lucky if I can guess even a small portion of the destination, and I'm usually really good at guessing. One of Harry's specialties in the Dresden verse is thaumaturgy, described as above, so below. Make something happen on a small scale and give it the energy to happen on a larger scale. Stormfront. Dictionary.com takes a much more simplistic definition of the term, the working of wonders or miracles, magic. It's just much less specific. Whatever you want to call it, this is a very common philosophy in magic, especially ritual magic. It goes back to one of the oldest root documents in alchemy, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, and the celebrated occultist Helena Petrona Blavatsky translated its opening passage as, "What is below is like that which is above, and what is above is similar to that which is below to accomplish the wonders of the one thing." In modern Wicca, many spells and rituals include Harry's maxim, "As above, so below." What this concept means in practical terms is, as Marion Zimmer Bradley puts it, the symbol is nothing and the reality is all. Gravelight. Basically, doing a magical ritual in the real world will only have as much effect as one believes it will on the spiritual plane, and it is on the spiritual plane that the actual magic occurs. As above, the spiritual, so below, the material. As below, so above. Magic occurs when the spiritual plane is made to reflect what occurs on the material through force of will and belief. The act of performing a spell or ritual, all of the tools and robes and altars, are only symbolic representatives of those elements in the spiritual. One uses those tools for the same reason Harry uses his blasting rod instead of simply casting fire out of his mind all the time. It makes it easier and more focused. In magic, whether witchcraft or ritualized, those tools make it easier for the imagination to shape the spiritual plane, and therefore make it more likely for the spell or ritual to be successful. Harry's largest thaumaturgical work is the creation of Little Chicago. This is, in essence, a scale model of Chicago meant to allow him to use it to follow people, eavesdrop, find things, etc. in actual Chicago. In order for it to work, every piece of it must be made of parts of the real landmarks of Chicago, and constantly updated as those parts change. If a part of the city changes, be it a road, tree, building, or any other piece, and it is not updated, the entire thaumaturgical model would no longer work. For reasons yet to be explained, the model's construction actually was flawed in a fashion like a surge of electricity going through a circuit breaker, proven guilty. Only according to Bob, Harry's magical air elemental lab assistant, who just happens to live in a skull, that circuit breaker would have been Harry, which would have basically destroyed Harry. Considering the amount of energy Harry claimed to have fed into Little Chicago, it would undoubtedly have destroyed the model as well, and Harry's lab, apartment, boarding house, and a good chunk of the city block, at minimum. I've done my best within this entry to minimize spoilers for viewers who are unfamiliar with the Dresden Files or who are not caught up with the series. If you are among such viewers, I hope I've piqued your interest, for Jim Butcher is truly a phenomenal talent. It is rare for me to find an author who so consistently keeps me on my toes with plot devices, dropped shoes, and general mystery. If you enjoy more traditional fantasy, I also recommend his Codex Alera series as a wonderful example of a hero who becomes so because of circumstances he created, rather than because of destiny, and rises to the occasion not because he's a hero, but because there is literally no one else who can take charge. He is the last in the line of command. Beyond my enjoyment of a good story, I appreciate an author who does his research, and Butcher is a fine example of that. There are so many examples, I couldn't possibly share them all, and many of them are integral plot points that I would rather not spoil. Harry Dresden is many things to many people. He is a wizard, he is a wild card, he is a friend, he is a dangerous vigilante, he is a teacher, he is a supplier of pizza, he is a rider of dinosaurs, and though he would probably disagree, he is a hero. He has challenged archangels, fairy queens, demigods, seducers, beings from beyond the gate, and scions of evil, and so far lives to tell the tale. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the occult and esoteric. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to sharing more information on these subjects in the near future. If you're interested in more of my videos, feel free to explore any of the links on screen now to subscribe or view another one. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, please share them in the comment section below or contact me via any of the social media links in the description.